What's up, guys? Thanks so much for checking out the channel again. Today we're continuing on our series here where we are reviewing different Hail Caesar factions, and we're moving right along. We're still in the BC period, and we're basically taking a look at the Hellenistic Greeks, which is basically the Greeks after sort of Alexander's passing. So not quite the Alexander successors, but in many ways similar, but also does some things different. So as it says here, the Greek armies following the period of Macedonian conquest up to the Roman occupation. So basically an army of transition that saw the hoplite gradually replaced with Thureophoroi or Thoricitai, and eventually then by the pike-armed phalanx. Some Greek states were slower to make that transition, but basically the hoplites are fading out, so that classical Greek style is fading out. So things to look for, like if you want some research, basically Achaean League, Aetolian League, and the Battle of Corinth as well. So in many ways this is going to be very similar to previous Greek lists that we've reviewed, but again, just a couple of wrinkles. As you can see here, the army specification or breakdown is very simple. There's not really all that much to it. So basically, infantry has to still be 75% of the army, does not include skirmishers as normal, and then cavalry can be up to a quarter. So, and that's probably a pretty decent balance there. But that being said, you could go, again, 100% infantry if you want. And then the usual division skirmisher thing is pretty standard as well. And overall, it's not a very lengthy list, but, that's kind of to be expected here. This isn't going to represent the many different things that, like, Alexander or successor lists could bring in. So it's more just the actual Greek city-states. So let's take a look. We, of course, start off with our hoplite infantry, very solid overall, not pike armed, but basically that standard hoplite heavy infantry unit. So typical stats of 7s there with morale of 4, and they're phalanx and drilled, all for 35 points. So again, it's very expensive per unit, but again, on the other hand, pretty solid overall, and comparable to most other heavy units, and certainly should deal with most medium and I would say certainly all light units that you're going to run into. Then we bring in this new wrinkle here, and that's the Thoricitai. Also heavy infantry with spears and javelins. So again, different from long spears, but just spears and javelins here, which does change the ranged ability a little bit. And these guys are just drilled, not actually a true phalanx, but also 6 points cheaper for us overall. And then we bring in Thureophoroi, which are medium actually. Also spears, javelins, a little bit of a drop there, of course, in combat ability to 6s and a lower morale save. Also just drilled though, but then again, the nice part about this list is the core of your army, basically, whichever way you go, light to medium infantry, whichever, all of them have at least drilled. We got the phalangites coming up next, but you also have phalanx available if you need to. But the Thureophoroi are a little bit cheaper still at 26 points a pop, though, and still, again, solid overall. Phalangites, then, what we kind of known under the Alexander list, so back up to the same stats as the hoplite heavy infantry, phalanx and drilled, but these guys do have the pikes, and again, 35 points a pop there. So then we get onto the Aetolian, Illyrian, or similar Peltas type troops, basically spears and javelins, which we could also downgrade to small units, or typical small unit light infantry type stats there. Then we get actual more skirmishers here with just javelins, and again corresponding stats there that we've all seen many times now, but these are all small units. That being said, we can give some upgrades. Basically half of them could get slings for some long range firepower, and then one unit could get bows, and then that one bow unit could extra also be Cretans, if I'm understanding that. Yeah, so but anyway, a little bit more long range ability there, and then if we just want to make that one bow unit Cretan archers for another point, might as well, really, just get marksmen, just so they can do a little bit more damage. Then we bring in our cavalry, and again we basically get two choices here. Now it's interesting, we'll talk about the last entry in just a moment. Medium cavalry armed with spears and or javelins, basically fairly solid for being medium cavalry, and that is again that clash of 8, but it drops down pretty quickly. And again, that well, a typical stat there of the morale save, but again, not going to necessarily deal with a long battle of attrition, but certainly they can hit hard. And we could also upgrade one unit to a guard unit, basically making them elite as well, which is a pretty nice option for 3 more points. Then we bring in some light cavalry, which gives us some really neat abilities here, more speed and maneuverability in Greek lists, which the earlier more foot slogging types didn't really have that same quality. And that's Thracian or Aetolian light cav with javelins as small units. Again, we get multiples of those. Then we can also upgrade one to Tarentines, which basically then also adds elite to our feigned flight. But just being able to get feigned flight sort of on tap is pretty cool for a Greek list here. And again, fairly cheap overall, just because these are all small units. Lastly, we get a light artillery bolt thrower option here for 15 points a unit. Unfortunately, I think there was a typo on Warlord's part, because there is no artillery category here. So what you could do, which would be reasonable, I mean, I could see it being put in with the infantry, but that might basically give you access to sort of a disproportionate amount of those if you wanted to field that. So what I would think is fair is to, just like we've seen in many other lists, basically just allow for basically a 10% to be artillery, and I think that would be fair, and I think most people would agree. But let me know what you guys have encountered there. But again, that does seem to make sense, and just being able to include that would be nice. And then, you know, you get that standard leadership 8 across the board. There weren't really any like super outstanding generals during this time for the Greeks, so that is pretty solid there. So it's an interesting list. Again, it's not quite as nasty as the Alexander list or the successors can be in the hands of a good general, but nonetheless, this list can still do a lot of things. You have basically some of that sort of classic Greek list that we've seen a couple different times in our review series here, along with some of the influences of the Macedonians and successors creeping in the form of phalangites and a little bit more cavalry use. So it's not quite that full combined arms type of list that those other two represent, really. But it is sort of, it's almost maybe call it like Macedonian light or successor light type of list with, again, just more that city-state feel to it. So, but overall pretty cool. And again, I would just, you know, mention that, artillery discrepancy there. And again, I think just allowing up to 10% artillery would be fair, basically, or even just something like 1 per division, just to keep it fair and prevent people from spamming that. But it does present a nice another long range option for people to field that. Now, of course, as we said in some other videos, it'd be nice if Warlord would actually just get around to making some more models for ancient artillery, not just the few that they have. That's a topic for a whole nother video. But anyway, let us know what you guys thought. Have you collected this? Again, if you've already collected Greeks, you can very easily play this army, and would basically, the only thing new model-wise would be basically just picking up Thorakitai and Thuriophori. Most of the cavalry you could already basically represent with other things that you should already have if you're playing these type of lists, and that wouldn't take too much work to use those 2 new infantry types there, but you don't have to either. You could just stick with hoplites and phalangites, really, if you wanted. But anyway, let us know what you think, what your experience is. Have you played against this list? Have you used it? Thoughts, comments, anything else you could think of? Drop us a like if you could. Thanks so much for stopping in today, guys. We appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one.